Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, and Mikah Sargent. We've got a show for you. We start things off talking a little bit about Facebook's Oculus and how it's getting ads and how no one's really that surprised, but it still kind of sucks. Also, a deep dive into the biggest announcements from E3 2021. Amazon's labor issues deepen. They continue to deepen. It's one story after another. And finally, the many ways that Amazon actually treats its users like beta testers. Is that okay? That's coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 188, recorded Thursday, June 17th, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Audible. For a limited time, Amazon Prime members can save 53% on 4 months of Audible. That's only $6.95 a month. Take advantage of this incredible limited time offer at audible.com/TNW. If you're listening after this limited time offer has expired and you're a new member, try Audible Plus for 30 days with a free trial at audible.com/TNW or text TNW to 500-500. And by Udacity. Gain in-demand tech skills in as little as 3 months with Udacity's part-time online tech courses. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Offer ends June 30th, 2021.
And supported by AT&T ActiveArmor. We rely so much on our phones these days, and we're always on them, whether it's live streaming content, catching up with family on weekly video calls, or watching your favorite podcast. There is no room for fraud calls. Thankfully, AT&T makes customer security a priority, helping block those pesky calls. It's not complicated. AT&T ActiveArmor, 24/7 proactive network security and fraud call blocking to help stop threats at no extra charge. Compatible device and service required. Visit att.com/ActiveArmor for details.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other one, Jason. Oh, I'm sorry.
God.
Jason Howell. No, that was a fake sneeze. See, I am an actor, but I do not have a fake cold. I have a real cold, which is weird. Let me tell you, it's strange to have a cold after like a year and a half of not having a cold.
For anybody watching, do not do as Jason does. Let's remember to do the vampire cowl or the dab to sneeze, not into our hands.
Yeah, you know, I figured it's my
please.
podcast setup. I can get my germs all over this thing if I wanna.
Yeah,
No
sometimes
biggie.
I look at this little microphone mesh thing and I go, you've really been through a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you
I need
really
like one of
do
those
need to clean these
ultrasonic
things.
cleaners. Yeah.
Totally.
Anyway.
Yes. Let's do this. And actually, we're going to start things off. We've got a strange order today. I'm going to go ahead and start with my story of the week, and then we've got a couple of awesome interviews, and then back to Mikah for his story of the week. And this one just kind of seemed to choose itself. Mikah, you and I are both fans of the Oculus and the Oculus Quest. Although I'm trying to remember, I know that I'm not a fan of the fact that Facebook requires a Facebook account. I'm trying to remember if you are, but I imagine you probably
not a
feel the
fan.
same. There we go. So we both sit on the same side of the fence as far as Facebook account required to use an Oculus headset. And so this next bit of news probably makes us both feel about the same. Facebook has announced that ads are now coming to the Oculus Quest VR devices. They're going to begin testing ads inside of games and apps. I guess I would have thought that if there were ads coming into the VR experience, it would be in the lobby where you're at. Like, you know, and I guess that the lobby to a certain degree is an ad because it's got the store implemented, you know, integrated into there, and you can buy other apps and games and stuff. But this is different. You're actually going to be playing a game. So it's first appearing in the game Blastin'. And apparently inside of the game, there's going to be place for ads to appear. They also said that there's a few other games in the coming weeks that are going to start getting ads. And I don't know. What is it? Ready Player One? That's the movie that comes to mind where you're in the VR experience and everywhere you look, it's like advertising everywhere. I don't think it's necessarily that, but hey, baby steps to that, right? That kind of feels like where we're at. Facebook has said that no on-device data is going to be used to target the ads, to which I say yet in bold letters.
Not only do we say yet to that, but we also say, okay, that because that's like, I don't know, punching someone in the face and then saying, but don't worry because I didn't kick you. It's like
perfect.
For me, the VR is a very intimate experience, and it is psychologically intimate as well. And so it's like a whole nother level. That's why, compare it to being punched in the face. It's like a whole nother level of viscerality for advertisements where I was reading a tweet recently of a friend of mine who was quoting their child. They were on the highway and the child happened to look up from whatever they were doing. I assume they were on their phone or something, and looked out at a billboard and said, why do they have these giant posters out here when nobody's looking at them? And in modern times, that is, I'm sure, more the case than it ever has been, because we're down looking at our phones or what have you, unless we're driving, let's hope. And it made me kind of realize that, a lot of the advertising right now is like ambient advertising that for the most part we can ignore and we don't pay attention to. But in VR, that's a whole nother level. And it is a little bit worrisome because this is only the jumping off point. And when we look at all of the psychological studies that have been, well, I shouldn't say all because there aren't a whole lot, but when we look at many of the psychological studies that have been done related to VR and the way that it helps us empathize and the way that it helps us connect and all that kind of stuff, and then you combine that with advertising, that gets really scary because I think it's going to have more of an impact than it ever has.
Yeah. Well, and that is precisely why Facebook is doing this. 97% of their revenue is earned through advertising. It literally is the majority, if not almost entirely, their revenue model. And I mean, when I saw this news, I wasn't surprised at all. I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. Facebook has the requirement for their account in order to actually run their VR headsets going forward. And this seems like, unfortunately, it's the next logical step, right? Requiring someone to use the Facebook account in order to use VR requires the user to pass certain amounts of data, certain pieces of data over to Facebook, which is very valuable. And it opens up the avenue for this sort of thing. Facebook has not been very good, or rather they've been expertly good, depending on how you look at it, at when they acquire something, they say what they need to say to make people hopefully feel better. Oh, don't worry, we're not going to require a Facebook account. We're not going to bring ads into your experience. We would never do that, while crossing their fingers behind their back. And then kind of wait long enough to where when they roll it out, the true diehards are going to be like, all right, that's it, I'm out, and they jump ship. Everyone else is just going to kind of go along for the ride because they don't have much of a choice, which kind of ties in with another story that I saw that's somewhat tangentially related to this. Casey Newton wrote for his Platformer art piece or newsletter, talking about how Facebook is really cornering the VR market with Oculus. They bought Big Box VR last week. That company makes Population 1, which is essentially Fortnite for VR, bought Unit 2 Games, maker of Creta, which is essentially Roblox for VR. A couple of years ago in 2019, bought Beat Games, maker of the incredibly awesome and popular Beat Saber, arguably one of the most popular VR titles at that time. 4 million copies sold. So Facebook's doing, and Casey Newton points this out, doing in many ways the same thing, operating by the same playbook that they did back in 2012 when they snapped up Instagram and all of these other purchases. And we see how that's played out over time, where it's like at the time it was like, oh yeah, Facebook owns Instagram now, it'll be interesting. Blah. They made certain assurances, in the Instagram buyout that, that the networks wouldn't be combined. And ultimately that ended up happening. Now we're in this world of big tech and antitrust allegations. Facebook's firmly planted in the middle of that conversation because of actions like this. So I don't know what that spells for the future of Oculus. The big downside, the most unfortunate part of this is that it's technologically speaking, the Oculus Quest to me is amazing. Like, it's an amazing experience, but it's got these huge aspects to it that make it a non-starter for a lot I'm
I thought you were going to say it's got these huge asterisks, which is also
yes, which is this basically the same thing. Yes.
Yeah. I'm with you, and it keeps me from suggesting it as much as I get excited about it. It keeps me from suggesting it as something that I think other people should take advantage of or check out, and I keep my eyes out for a better option. As somebody who which doesn't exist, because there are a few other options out there, but not for me as a Mac user, where I need something that's, if I want to do VR stuff, I need something that's disconnected from my computer, that doesn't require the computer. And there's just nothing else out there that can do that at the level that the Oculus Quest 2 can do that. And I mean, the other thing about it is, like, the Quest 2 keeps getting better and better.
It really does.
The last update added even more stuff. Now you can bring your desk into virtual space. There were a bunch of new change. I can't even remember all of them. The hand tracking got a lot better. Yeah, AirLink now. Yep. There's a lot of cool stuff, and it's just it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
Yeah, it's tied to that entity that, and mind you, that entity and the power and money behind it are many of the reasons why the cool things are happening on the Oculus. So it really is a trade-off. It's like, okay, if you want the cool stuff, you're going to have to give us your attention for the ads that we're putting into this device on your Facebook account that is required to use it. Sorry, but not sorry. That's Facebook's perspective at this point. I don't know if it gets to a point to where it goes too far for more people than it already has, because it seems like largely, people are still hanging on. There's a lot of people, though, that I've seen online that are like, when Facebook bought Oculus, this was the reason that I got out then. And it's nice to see it come full circle and to know and to feel like victorious in my decision to leave back then, because I knew one day this was going to happen. And here we are. And they were right. Here we are.
So alas, here we are.
Yes.
All right.
That's my story of the week. That's what I got.
All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back in just a second. There were a lot of announcements at E3. You may have been hearing about some of the cool stuff that's happening, but which are the most important? Well, we'll try to answer that shortly. But first, I want to tell you about Audible, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Look, forget about last summer. It's all about this summer. We've all been inside long enough. I know I have. So grab some beach towels, stock the cooler, and make your escape. It is time to celebrate the best season of the year for some people like never before. Man, I literally the first time. So, we get new copy every once in a while. And I got this new copy and I'm starting to read through it. And I'm thinking beach towels and I'm thinking Audible and I'm thinking, how awesome would it be to go to the beach with my audiobook? I'm just lounging, soaking in the sunlight, and the waves are crashing in the background, and I'm listening to this audiobook and letting it take me away. Oh, that sounds so awesome. With so many great stories and programs, Audible is the perfect summer partner. And now is the absolute best time to do it, because Prime members can save 53% off their first 4 months. With Audible, you can listen to more of whatever you're into, because Audible has it all. An unbeatable selection of audiobooks, tons of binge-worthy podcasts, and exclusive originals, all available to download or stream. So here is what you will get. As an Audible member, you can choose one title a month, like the latest bestseller or hottest new release, yours to keep forever. But here's the best part. You also get full access to Audible's streaming library, the Plus catalog. Discover your next podcast obsession. Check the audiobook off your bucket list or get lost in a world of original content from celebrity creators, best-selling authors, and leading experts. The kind of stuff you can't hear anywhere else. Stream all you want as much as you want. Audible is the perfect companion for summer because no matter where you're going or what you're doing, you'll always have just the right thing to listen to at your fingertips. It's perfect for road trips, lazy beach days, long bike rides, or just barbecuing in the backyard. I love Audible. I am currently listening through, let's see, what is my current audiobook? I'm on the second audiobook in the series here, An Echo of Things to Come by, I believe it's James Islington. And this is just the latest in a series of audiobooks that I've been listening to, and just getting immersed in another environment, getting lost in another world. It's really quite pleasant. And I think if you've not listened to an audiobook before, you should definitely give it a try. Find one that sounds like it might be something for you, and sit back, relax, and take it all in. It's really quite the experience. Right now, for a limited time, Amazon Prime members can save 53% on 4 months of Audible. That's only $6.95 a month. If you're not an Amazon Prime member, what are you waiting for? Go to Amazon and sign up so you can get this deal and so much more. Get more out of summer with Audible. To take advantage of this incredible limited time offer, go to audible.com/TNW. If you're listening after the limited time offer has expired and you're a new member, well, just try Audible Plus for 30 days with a free trial at audible.com/TNW or text TNW to 500-500. Our thanks to Audible for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, Jason Howell, take it away.
Well, when we invite our next guest on the show, he usually is the one to take it away. The Electronic Entertainment Expo, aka E3, kicked off almost a week ago. The first E3, by the way, since 2019, because 2020 happened, and we all know what happened in 2020. So it's been a cavalcade, if I can use that word, of game announcements. Joining us to pick the highlights is Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica. Welcome back, Sam.
Well, hello, everybody. Are you just expecting me to yammer the entire time about video games, which I am passionate about? Because if so, I've got yammering for you.
So I'm just going to say the word video game, and then you got 15 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
Listen, I'm interested in having a conversation because E3, we put in scare quotes, is confusing this year. It didn't happen in a convention hall. And therefore, I kind of wonder how you see it from the other side of maybe not following video games intently. And I'm happy to kind of talk people through what the heck a summer full of video game hype and announcements looks like this year.
Well, E3, like in years past, is usually a very experiential thing, right? It's an event that you go to. I have to imagine. Now, I've not attended E3 as a journalist. I'm not a game journalist. That's why we bring you on. But you've been to E3 in the past, and I have to imagine E3 in the past is very hands-on, right? It's like, here are all these games, and you get to get your first kind of look and understand these games on a deeper level. How different was that this year? Because as with everything, the last year and a half, it's basically online. It's a very different approach. Did that really impact your ability to report about it?
It's interesting because video game companies really want to control how their brand new fancy games are perceived. So when you go to a giant expo hall like in Los Angeles for E3 normally, you have this mix of things you can play and things you can't. And they want everything to seem like it's done and it's playable and it's real. But one of the most famous examples of that not coming true was Cyberpunk 2077, which I went into one of those behind closed doors things where a person was holding a controller and seeming to play the game. Turned out it was all BS. We all found out years later through all the Cyberpunk news reports for the past 6 months that was hogwash. They faked a bunch of it, and the final game turned out to be very broken and very different. So there's that some now we kind of know for sure. If you only see it as a YouTube video, well, we don't know how truly real or playable it is. On the other hand, the playable stuff that you would normally get, maybe the smaller games, we got a lot less of that. You know, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, the kind of the three biggest names, didn't come out and say, hey, you know, you can't meet up with us in person because of the convention center being closed. So here's a different way to play games. Now, other games companies swooped in to kind of fill in those shoes. But interestingly, this year, Ubisoft in particular used to be very good at saying, hey, get onto Parsec, a streaming service, and you can play our unfinished game on the cloud. And it's, you know, there's some asterisks and there's some caveats that it's not completely done. And this year, Ubisoft particularly skipped that opportunity, which I thought was interesting. And the fact they had a pretty meager showing of no Assassin's Creed, no Watch Dogs. A lot of the series that you're used to from Ubisoft didn't get annualized announcements. So it was kind of funky, but now I suppose I'm in the same shoes as most everyone else of all being able to say, well, we didn't get to play that thing. We merely got to watch it. But there's still stuff that looks like real games, stuff that was a real game that we can talk about today.
Yeah, well, and you were talking a little bit about Ubisoft. They're the ones behind Mario plus Rabbids, right? And that ties into kind of the Nintendo side of things. So is that a title that you're looking forward to? I know that there was a Metroid title that looked really awesome to me, just purely because from a nostalgic standpoint, that's the era of the 2D platformer era of Metroid is really the one that speaks to me. But what stood out to you there?
Well, Nintendo, I think, had a really interesting showing because they have previously announced a bunch of stuff. We knew that they were working on Breath of the Wild 2. We knew they were working on Splatoon 3, a continuation of that very interesting kid-friendly shooter series. We knew they were working on Bayonetta 3, which is this very hardcore gamer slash things around kind of game. A few others. And so we were wondering what they would show. And this year is an interesting mix of enough games per month, is sort of letting us know, yeah, we're still putting stuff out. But Japanese game studios in particular, based on what I followed, were really, really crunched by the realities of COVID. I can't speak exactly to what's different between Eastern and Western game development in terms of how that stuff worked. But we were all kind of curious how all these different game companies would emerge from that and say, here's what we have for the end of 2021 after so many months of being stuck in home. And so we only got a tiny taste of Breath of the Wild 2. Looks really cool. It looks like a game because it looks very much like the last game. It doesn't look souped up or faked. And it adds a city in the sky. So where the last game saw Link really build up a stamina meter to crawl over all of these giant mountains. And that was the big gameplay hook was, you know, working up the strength and ability to sort of climb and clamber around this giant world and sort of figure out through middle of the game puzzles just how to get through the world. And now that goes into the sky. So there's floating through different cloud cities and having a much more intense glider, even a special power where Link could turn into water and go from a ceiling to a floor, go between like a little cliffside and flip up that way, and other little abilities. But that was just a very meager taste. And then we were told 2022. And then Nintendo also has a Legend of Zelda Game & Watch, which was Game Boy before Game Boy. It was the early 80s toy that really blew up in Japan. That was sort of a combination calculator game system. And that'll have 3 classic Zelda games and a watch and a little dinky Game & Watch mini game. And that's going to be sort of the big 35th anniversary Zelda release this year, along with a remaster of a Wii game called Skyward Sword. So 35th anniversary for Zelda, in my opinion, didn't quite get the big hits that I think a lot of super fans were hoping for. There's a lot to go through in terms of what Nintendo released, and we have a bunch of that on Ars Technica. And by released, I mean announced and shown off. But Metroid Dread is back to 2D. And that title's interesting because Metroid Dread was the name of a game that was hinted to and then canceled and then brought back to life and then canceled and is finally back. And there were rumors and hints about all this, and Nintendo denied it. And then this week, finally, there was a long presentation where they admitted that they'd started the game twice and then killed it as a sort of 2D game. And that was in the mid-2000s when 3D was ruling and Metroid Prime was doing very well. Well, we know Metroid Prime 4 is in development. It's been delayed. We don't know when it's coming out. That game, as far as we know, was rebooted and handed off to a different developer midway through. So Metroid Dread's going to have to fill us in for now, and that's made by a company called Mercury Steam, who already made a Metroid game a few years ago that was for the 3DS. And they've clearly charmed Nintendo enough to be handed what's considered an official canon sequel. In fact, they're calling it the end of the mainline Metroid series. It will end that story. They're calling it Metroid 5 unofficially in terms of the 2D Metroid games. So that's a lot to hand to a third-party developer. And that's showing Nintendo's increasing willingness to work with partners, for example, with Ubisoft on that Mario and Rabbids collaboration. Like, Nintendo is willing more now than ever to say, hey, fans of Nintendo from the West, here you go. You love the series so much, you do it. So I think that's a really cool move on their part. Ultimately, there was a lot of random stuff that ranges between hardcore and family friendly. There's a series called Advance Wars, which is a strategy game for the Game Boy Advance, and that's getting re-released for the Switch. And I assume it's going to sell like gangbusters, because what Game Boy Advance install base was nothing compared to how crazy people are about the Switch. And so Nintendo has that room to wiggle around and release things that were big back in the day and remastered it and hitting a whole new audience now. And then there's a Pokemon re-release, a remaster coming out in November. And they didn't even talk about it at E3 because it's just Pokemon, and that's going to do fine. So Nintendo's doing fine, but not everything that we super nerds were dreaming of being unveiled and released as a trailer this week.
Now, what were you dreaming of from Microsoft? Because it sounds like everybody is smitten with the news from the event about Xbox Game Pass and kind of the power and breadth of that catalog. What did you think?
I mean, I said this last year, and I'm saying it again this year. Xbox Game Pass is the game of the show, meaning you're spending $15 a month if you're paying the full price. And there are ways to get discounts and bundles and free trials and things like that to get an incredible allotment of new interesting games every month. And they went on a crazy acquisition spree in the past few years. And the fruits of that are really starting to show, because basically every month there's a big game this year coming out on Game Pass for Xbox consoles, including Microsoft Flight Simulator, which was previously computer only, Psychonauts 2, Age of Empires 4 for computer, Halo Infinite at some point this holiday season. I don't have the entire list in front of me right now, but basically there's a lot of diversity in genre. And there's also a bunch of third-party games where Microsoft goes to people and says, hey, here's some money. Please be on Game Pass on day and date. The idea being you don't even have to sort of wait. You get the subscription service, and all of the big stuff, all of the cool stuff, all of the Microsoft-specific stuff is there day one. Compare that to some of Sony's subscription offerings, particularly PlayStation Now, which holds a lot of their biggest games off, where they say, pay the $60 or nowadays $70 at launch to get access to our biggest games. Oh, but use our subscription service for smaller fry fare. And Microsoft is on the other side saying, here's everything. Here's all of our big stuff. If you just want to be up to date with the biggest Xbox things, get on Game Pass. So that show of force was really big. I was really hoping for more. You asked what I hoped for. And Halo Infinite, to me, came out a little shyer than I had expected. I thought that we were going to see a little bit more of what the traditional campaign would look like. And I don't say single player for that, because sometimes that's for co-op, where you and some friends can all team up and Master Chief your way through a big landscape. And last year, its reveal got so criticized that they delayed the game a full year. Well, they're not delaying it, apparently. It's coming out holiday of this year, though we don't know exactly when. And a lot of people are guessing that they're waiting for the newest Call of Duty to get a release date before they pick their date, because they want to space it out. There's already a new Battlefield. There's going to be a new Call of Duty. And so Halo's squeezing in on the shooty shoot. So I'm not shocked about that. But they didn't show what that campaign stuff will look like. And if you've been playing Halo a long time, that's what you think about for Halo. You think about teaming up with friends on an epic quest against very smart artificial intelligence bad guys. They did show a bunch of the online versus mode stuff, and that's all free to play. However you want to play it, you can get on there free to play day and date. You don't even have to be on Game Pass to access it. And then there's an additional battle pass that's all cosmetics only. They're very clear. If you just want to play, if you don't want to spend a single penny, every mode, every gun, every feature will be included. Wow. That's huge. And that's going to bring a lot of people in. And I imagine they're going to find a way for Game Pass to also be part of the perks where, oh, well, if you're part of Game Pass or you buy the campaign content or something, you get a little more for multiplayer, maybe an outfit. I don't know. But that's a big deal. And the other big thing that Microsoft pushed right before E3 was cloud. They're very bullish on saying, we want it to be easy and useful for you to get on the cloud. And I break that down a lot at Ars Technica, but the bottom line is they're getting a lot of things right that Stadia got wrong. In particular, Game Pass. Oh, if you pay for the ultimate flavor of Game Pass, which is $15 a month, all the games are just there. You don't have to buy them a la carte. You don't have to worry about whether the service is going to get canceled in a couple of years and your whole library goes away. It's just that monthly giant buffet style with a lot of content that's immediately available. And their cloud stuff works on a lot of devices. And one thing they announced was if you have an older Xbox One, they're going to release an app by the year's end that lets you dip into the cloud and lets you see whether your connection is up to snuff and how good it feels. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of people who just have an old Xbox One and they don't have to get rid of it. They can just attach it as a very focused cloud device and have it work and tell their kids, oh, you want to play the newest games? You don't have to buy a new box. Here you go. Wow. And that's going to lock a lot of people into Xbox in an interesting way. I think it's genius. Everything they did from a business side is genius.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's super compelling. Awesome. Okay, so that's a value pack there. God, there's so much to talk about, and we don't really have enough time to talk about everything. If you had to name a couple of the indie titles that you're super excited about, what would those be?
Man, I'll tell you, the thing I'm going to suggest is go to Steam on PC or go to Xbox if you've got an Xbox console. They have the biggest E3-style demo slews right now. The Idea at Xbox Festival that's on Xbox right now has about 40 games, includes something called Tunic, which looks a lot like Legend of Zelda. It's been teased for years. It's the most playable this game has ever been. It's a very long, meaty demo that's closer to Zelda, but with a hint of the challenge and weirdness of Dark Souls, but not hard. It's really compelling. Tunic is that one. And Steam has something called Steam Next Fest, which has 700 game demos. That's way too many.
Wow.
I have a feature at Ars Technica that picks out some of my favorites, and I'll just shout one out that's a total trip. It's called Lake. It is a combination of Gilmore Girls and the arcade game Paperboy, meaning it's very slow, it's dialogue driven, it's not challenging, but it's this very empathetic story about coming back to a town you once lived in to deliver mail. And it's just a trip. I look at that and I go, video games are so different now than they were for me when I was a kid. Just the way that this story tells, the story lands as you control this very slow mail truck. It's not Grand Theft Auto. But the way that you have to do these basic tasks and talk to townspeople, it's unbelievable. Never seen anything like it. And if you want more gamer stuff, then there's a game called Death Trash, which is where you're in a post-apocalyptic landscape and you're killing zombies and you're figuring out why a robot society has taken over and humans have become secondhand. It's a trip. So like those are just two examples on Steam Next Fest of crazy, weird, out of nowhere games that indies are doing. And you can play them as opposed to Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony not letting you play anything this year.
The combo I never thought I'd ever hear in my entire life is it's a game that mixes Gilmore Girls and Paperboy.
I love it.
Yeah, but I'm super compelled to check that out. I wish we had time to talk about Elden Ring, the trailer, namely because it seems like everybody names it as a big highlight. Would you agree?
Yeah, Elden Ring is the most gamer game of E3 2021. And it's coming out next year, and it combines Dark Souls and George R.R. Martin, meaning you can ride a horse around and it can jump really high in the air, and there's dragons, fire, magic, swords. It just looks like a darned video game, and it looks big, and it doesn't look like a BS trailer. It looks real, and I really hope that we get to play it sometime before the end of the year in one way or another, but it's not coming out until 2022. But it was one of those things that reminds you of why we strap in and watch all these game trailers and get into the hype stuff, because yeah, it looks sick, but you know, whether it's going to be as good as it looks remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot to look forward to coming up, and always something to look forward to if you're following Sam Machkovech on Ars Technica. I love your piece. You also posted about the Beatles documentary, which I am so looking forward to. Everybody should check out the work that Sam is doing at arstechnica.com. Yeah, thank you as always for hopping on with us today. We appreciate it, Sam.
Absolutely. Yeah, at Sam Red on Twitter or at Ars_union. We had big news as part of our union yesterday, and I'll let you read about it if that's interesting to you. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Up next, Amazon has a troubling relationship with some of its employees. What's the historical context, and what are the latest examples of that? Stay tuned to find out. But first, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about Udacity. Udacity offers a unique part-time online education program geared for those who are looking to take their tech knowledge to the next level with specialized and exciting content. Udacity offers the latest cutting-edge nano-degree programs, many of which are not available anywhere else, such as AI, deep learning, flying car, yes, that's right, flying car, and autonomous flight engineer, intro to self-driving cars, machine learning engineer, and robotics software engineer. Those sound so cool. To create the course content, Udacity partners with industry leaders such as Microsoft, Google, IBM, AWS, and more. And get this, they select team leads at top companies to be the instructors. If you love learning and are always looking to know more new tech stuff, well, Udacity is for you. Udacity can help you master the latest tech skills and techniques. Courses are project-based with active learning that covers cutting-edge technology and lets you test your knowledge. Homework and projects are actually reviewed by qualified professionals, so you're going to have real human feedback and reviews with access to mentors 24/7. That is huge. So you're not just, going through some video courses and then sort of forgetting about the information. You are going to be interfacing with real people. Udacity's flexible schedules mean you can put in just 5 to 10 hours a week working at your own pace any time of the day or night and graduate in as little as 3 months. The World Economic Forum estimates that 75 million jobs will be replaced by automated processes within the next 3 years. Udacity prepares its students for the jobs of the future. More than 14 million people in over 240 countries now use Udacity. Check out their detailed course listings at udacity.com. Once you enroll as a student in a specific course offering, you'll be prompted to view the online course as well as complete a series of projects and support courses. They offer flexible payment options, and you can learn at your own pace and schedule. Udacity also has free courses if you just want to check it out. And by the way, does your team need to master cutting-edge technologies like data science, AI, and cybersecurity? Well, with Udacity for Enterprise, you can upskill your entire workforce with real-world, project-based learning. Be sure to check out the Enterprise section of Udacity's website today. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Offer ends June 30th, 2021. So hop on that 75% off. That is huge. That's udacity.com/twit and enter TWIT75. Thanks so much to Udacity for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly and for that incredible deal. 75% off. Go there, udacity.com/twit. Do it. Do it. All right. Let us get back to the show. We on this show have talked in the past about Amazon and its troublesome history with its employees and in the way that, the word pee bottle comes to mind. The word Twitter bashing comes to mind. Phrase Twitter bashing comes to mind. There's been lots of stuff that's going on, but what I learned in reading this article on CNET from Laura Hautala was that this has kind of been going on for a while in one way or another. And so joining us today is Laura to kind of talk about the historical context and the latest instances of Amazon workers looking to, in their eyes, get paid for part of their work. So welcome back to the show, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let us start kind of at the beginning here. So this story in particular is about an ongoing issue that's not unique to Amazon per se. Can you talk a little bit about the history of workers looking to be compensated for the time that they spend in kind of processes that have been set forth by the companies for which they work?
Yeah. So there's this issue with work in industry or light industry where when you're getting ready for your job, things that are required by your employer, whether it's coming through a security screening or getting screened for COVID-19 or putting on some protective gear, sharpening your knives if you work at a butcher facility, anything like that is kind of considered, it's something you're doing prior to your work or after your work, coming through the security screening on the way out, things like that. There's a legal question of whether that is part of your principal work activities. And if it's not, then federal law says you don't actually have to pay employees for that time. So the things like sharpening knives, putting on protective gear, that has been seen as essential to those jobs. That is part of the principal activity to do your job safely and effectively. So that should be compensated. But so far, there is more of a legal gray area and more decisions in favor of employers saying they don't have to pay for things like security checks under federal law.
Understood. Yeah. So in this case, the security checks are something that when you were going into your shift happens, but also something that surprised me that I didn't realized before was how it can impact lunch breaks and the period of time after their shift ends. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the specifics there with the size of the warehouses and also the federal regulations around employees and the breaks that they're supposed to be allowed to take?
Right. So going into Amazon facilities right now, the main issue is COVID-19 screenings. And then coming out, it's the security checks. And in the past, workers said that those checks took a really long time, 10, 15, maybe even 30 minutes, waiting in line and then having your pockets or bags searched. And so that is something that is, that they weren't able to get compensated for under a Supreme Court ruling in 2014. So the question of the breaks is a different matter, though, because not under federal law, but under state law in California, where there are a lot of Amazon warehouse workers, you're supposed to get at least 10 minutes of rest, and you have to have 30-minute lunch break, and the rules around that are really strict. So if you're going through these security screenings or your lunch break and you're getting stopped and searched, are you really getting that full 30-minute break? Or if you're walking across, a warehouse that may be 800,000 square feet to get to your break room and you only get to sit down for 5 minutes, are you really getting that break? A judge has ruled that those questions can't be answered in a class action. And so those claims won't be decided in a court unless a higher judge throws out that ruling. But it really speaks to something that whether or not is legal really bothers a lot of workers. It's just like, I'm not really getting a break. I'm not really getting all the time I'm supposed to get. Even if it's a legal gray area, people find it to be an indignity, essentially. So there's this open question of Amazon has control of their time and it has these requirements, or it's built into the way the facilities are. And workers, have been trying in court to get paid for that.
Now, people might hear the part where you said a judge has decided it can't be a class action, or can't be decided in court. And of course, that could be overturned, like you said. But did that judge give any reason for why they felt that this was something that couldn't be decided at this level? And did the judge give any recourse to the employees for what they were supposed to do instead to have this decided?
Well, so you were actually right the first time. It can't be decided as a class action. And that's actually a pretty high bar to clear for workers to get through to have a certified class where they can press claims like this for unpaid wages. And the problem is when things are not the same in every facility, it to the court looks like, well, not everyone is going through a metal detector. Not everyone has to wait. Sometimes the metal detectors aren't working. Sometimes there's a line, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes workers clock out and then talk to their friends and then go through security. So how are we supposed to know exactly how much workers should be owed? And so the question is, can these claims be paid on a class basis? And the reason that workers and lawyers try to do that is because adjudicating like a single claim where, I think probably owe me a few $100s, that's small claims court. So the class action is really the tool, the powerful tool for workers who think that kind of en masse they've been denied wages.
Understood. Okay, so this is sort of a matter of inconsistencies that play a role in this. So I guess in that case, Are the inconsistencies the same, or have they increased with the introduction of COVID to this mix? I guess what I'm asking is, of course, we have the historical context of those security checks, but as there have been more complaints and more focus with the COVID-19 screenings, is that also the case that those cannot kind of be included or be used as a means to follow through with a class action?
That is still up in the air. So a judge has not decided whether or not workers can make those claims. I think that it is probably a different situation. Most employers will argue that something shouldn't be certified as a class because it's too different everywhere. It's up to a judge to decide whether that's the case or not. It is just a really common legal argument from an employer. But with the COVID-19 checks, Amazon is going to rely on its earlier win where it didn't have to pay for the security check, saying that this isn't something that's particularly important for their work, that they could do their work without doing that activity. And the plaintiffs are arguing that that's not the case. And they're also arguing that there's federal guidance that those kinds of health checks should be paid. So that case is the one that's most up in the air. Those claims for that unpaid time could still go forward.
Interesting. Okay. And then let's talk about then, of course, going through the courts is one way. And is this a means of setting precedent for future cases? Is this, because I remember in your article, and I'm trying to remember where it came from, but there was kind of the judge had talked about sort of two ways that these things can go, where it's like big judgments where employees get money or end up making money off of it. And then there's another way where they end up having to kind of dissolve. The company ends up having to dissolve. But in this case, these are about setting precedent. Can you talk about the different examples there?
Yeah. So, Amazon has become a huge employer. They say they employ 1.3 million people globally, and there may be more than half of those that are in the US. And also there's all the people who've already churned through Amazon because they do reportedly have really high turnover, especially in warehouse work. So millions of people have worked for them. There's going to be more lawsuits as a result of that. And because they're a big company, they're not going to disappear overnight if they lose in court. They're going to be around to pay. So that's kind of in terms of somebody who's considering suing their employer, that, if they can win, there is going to be a judgment there at the end of the day. And Amazon has shown itself really willing to fight in court. So it really seems like Amazon could be a real heavyweight in kind of influencing the way workplace law is enforced everywhere, because it's going to be really going to the mat on these cases, and there's likely going to be a lot more of these cases.
Gotcha. Understood. And then the other example or the other means is unionizing, and is often used as a way to, or at least is attempted to be used as a way to bring some level of bargaining to the table. And I don't want to spoil it because folks should go read this piece, but I really like how you ended this piece. But ahead of that, can you just talk quickly about the kind of Amazon employees' attempts to unionize and how that could help these employees if that ever happened, if that were to go through?
Right. So if Amazon employees were ever to successfully unionize, they would have the ability to say, you know what, if you're not going to pay us for these COVID-19 screenings, we would like, an extra 50 cents per hour. Increase our wage because, we're spending a lot of time in these screenings. We know it's for the common good, but it's time out of our day. And so we want to bargain for something higher. Right now, that's not really an option for workers who are ununionized, employed by really big companies. They can complain to their managers. They can even organize strikes or walkouts without being unionized. But Amazon in particular has been found by the National Labor Relations Board to retaliate against workers who organize that kind of action. So, right now, unionizing isn't really on the table, or union action and bargaining isn't really on the table. But, that if that was to happen, then the employees would have kind of a means to get around, this might be a legal gray area, you don't really have to pay us, but come on, this is our time. So pay us some other way.
Understood. Well, Laura Hautala, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for joining us to talk about this. And folks should go read that piece. If people want to follow you online and check out all your great work, where can they go to do so?
cnet.com/Laura Hautala.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, up next, Mikah has his story of the week also about Amazon. But first, this podcast is supported by AT&T ActiveArmor. We're relying so much on our phones these days, and we're always on them, whether it's live streaming content, catching up with family on weekly video calls, or even watching your favorite podcast. There is no room for fraud calls. And I will say our phones do an okay job of making fraud calls more transparent, at least, but they aren't foolproof. And if my incoming calls list is any indication, fraudsters, they're constantly figuring out ways of bypassing some of the methods that companies like Google and Apple are putting into their OSs. And that's why it's important to get these kinds of calls at the network level before they get through the network. So thankfully, AT&T makes customer security a priority, helping block those pesky calls. And it's not complicated. AT&T ActiveArmor, 24/7 proactive network security and fraud call blocking to help stop threats at no extra charge. Compatible device and service required. Visit att.com/ActiveArmor for more details. All right, Mikah, what you got?
So there's this great piece in the New York Times by Brian X. Chen about Amazon and its ongoing means of experimenting in public, of iterating in public and using the public to iterate on what it creates. There were several mentions in this piece about some of the stuff, and I love, if we can show the page, there's this excellent animation of a Amazon customer in a guinea pig wheel, and there are Amazon scientists, so to speak, on the side who are sort of seeing how the customer performs. And the idea here is that we are the guinea pigs for Amazon's devices. And it's, the question is, why does it need our help to figure out what it's doing, what it wants to do? The first example that's in the piece, it's a bit of an anecdote, is about the Echo Look. The Echo Look was this device that was a camera that could take photos of you in clothes and then build out a library of your wardrobe, and then also offer suggestions of things to wear, things not to wear. And over time, that product was retired. And when it was retired, it was pretty much retired fully, meaning that you, having bought this device for like $200, could no longer make use of it. It was, kaput. It was useless. And the person in the anecdote kind of talks about how, okay, sure, if that's something that you want to do, you do that, but don't make me lose access to the camera. Don't make me lose access to this device. Don't make this $200 device a brick. And I always stand for that. I always will advocate for that. If you purchase a thing and a company no longer wants to support it, then sure, a company no longer wants to support it, but don't suddenly cut me off from this hardware that I bought. Then they also talk about dash buttons, which I remember fondly, were these little buttons that you could buy. And oftentimes when you buy them, you would get, so for the cost, it was like $2.99 to $3.99, I don't remember. And when you bought it, then they would give you a $3.99 credit or $2.99, whatever it was. You would get that money back the first time that you used it. And the dash button, it was a button that was connected to your home Wi-Fi, and there was just a AAA battery inside, and you press the button and all it did was order whatever product that you tied it to. So I would have it tied to, like, toiletries and kitchen stuff and all sorts of different kind of replenishables. And when I would go to wherever it was, say dog treats, for example, I would pull out some greenies for the dogs, and I would see, oh, there are 4 more left. And so I would hit the little greenies button, and in 2 days' time, I would have a new bag of greenies just in time for, me to need to replace them. And it was super handy. It was super great. And then Amazon saw the usage of the dash buttons just drop. And so then they stopped supporting them. And suddenly you had all of these Wi-Fi connected buttons in your home that were completely unusable. And there were some third-party folks who were trying to turn them into something that you could use for, say, a Internet of Things button. But because of the way they were created, unless you had a specific app and a specific device and a specific account, and you had these sort of specific settings set up, you couldn't actually make use of it. You could not take it and customize it to however you want. So I just suddenly had a bunch of buttons that I couldn't do anything with. They just were useless. And with those, I felt less bad about it than spending the $200 and not having a product anymore, because at least with those, I recouped the cost of them. But that's a lot of e-waste, because I had like 12 or 14 of those things. And then there's the Fire Phone, Amazon's kind of most infamous product, which was a smartphone they created that had this sort of 2D, 3D, 4D effect, where you could look at the phone screen and it had like a layered UI. And it was a resounding failure. And so Amazon just did what Amazon does, where it just stopped supporting the device. And there were many a Fire Phone that just disappeared. And then there's Amazon's, and look how this list just keeps going. And then there's Amazon Sidewalk, which I've talked a lot about this with Matthew Casanelli and with Rosemary Orchard on Smart Tech Today. Also, Stacey Higginbotham of Stacey on IoT has talked a lot about Amazon Sidewalk, and we both are hesitant to be super negative about Amazon Sidewalk, and in some ways are bullish about the technology, because it could potentially be a really cool, really empowering technology that basically lets your devices that are in odd places that are far away from Wi-Fi or far away from your network be able to still get connection and stay connected. And Amazon has a lot of security in place. They've got several white papers they've released about it. So all of those things lead up to it being a good thing. But the way they rolled it out, where just by default, suddenly everybody who had the devices that supported Sidewalk were opted into Sidewalk. That's another example of Amazon iterating in public and, letting us all be guinea pigs along the way. And that one kind of came back to bite them a little bit, because enough tech press got wind of it and paid attention to it that it made its way all the way to the average person's press. It was on Good Morning America, and it was, shared around. So that is one example where folks are paying more attention. They also talk about the Halo band and the future of that product, how that could be slowly disappearing based on usage. And then what I really like is that Brian X. Chen goes on to compare Amazon's methods with some examples of other methodology. There's a design expert that Chen talked to, who was talking about his time working with Apple on products. And at one point, Apple was working with Sony on something. And when they went to work with Sony on something, Apple was saying, we're going to, we'll experiment, we'll practice, we'll test this out. We'll, go through hundreds of prototypes. It's always been Apple's way of going through a bajillion prototypes to come to something. And Sony going, are you serious? There's no way we're doing that. We'll release a product. We'll see what people think about it. If it's a failure, we'll cancel it. We'll get rid of it. We'll stop using it. We'll stop it. And, Apple going, that's not how we do things. That's not how we want to do things. And then Chen also talked about one of the best-selling, not most popular in terms of purchase, but most popular in terms of kind of reaction to it, was a device that was a television that Samsung made called the Frame TV. And this was a TV that over the course of, I think, a few years, they came to a design decision on what the device would be, how it would work, what it would do. And it is meant to look like a picture frame on the wall that will show you artwork. And it's got motion sensors in it so that when someone's in the room, then it'll pop up the artwork. But when they leave, then it will turn off the TV or put the TV to sleep. And it was so well liked, and a bunch of people bought this television. And still to this day, I've even seen folks going, I want to find one of these frame TVs. They're so cool. And so it was kind of showing how considered design often leads to products that people love, which leads to them using them more, which leads to less reason for them needing to be canceled. But Amazon's way of doing things is kind of an inbuilt methodology that is inspired and encouraged by its CEO, or at the time CEO, and lead of the company, Jeff Bezos, who has always talked about failing, Amazon being the place to fail and experiment and stuff like that. And so I find it interesting because I think that there should be a level of failure and experimentation that's included that does lead to innovation, but that those things should not happen at the market level, that they should happen internally and with, testers and that kind of thing, versus selling a product that you very well may cancel and completely stop supporting at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that's really been Amazon's big approach here with its Echo devices specifically, has been the spaghetti on the wall approach. I remember there for a couple of years, it seemed like you wouldn't get any hardware announcement from from Amazon. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, Amazon is teasing all of these new Echo devices, and there's like 20 of them. And some of them like make a whole lot of sense. Others, you're just like, wait a minute, what? You made that into an Echo device? And like immediately with that announcement, you could almost, pick out the things that just simply aren't going to stand the test of time. Although I will say the Echo as a device, when it first came out, would absolutely be included on the list of what a lot of people thought had no chance of succeeding, right? And I'm sure that you remember when it was released, there were not home assistants at that point. And right. The Amazon Echo was the first of its kind, really, to hit any sort of mainstream, storefront. And the ad was ridiculous. The ad, just made, if you watched the ad initially, the announcement ad, it was, you couldn't help but laugh at it because it was like, okay, this is just ridiculous. Like, why would I ever use this device? But it worked. It sold people on the idea, and Amazon really doubled down on that. And I'd say in general, that strategy, as user hostile as it can be, has in many ways worked for Amazon. They've really become very ubiquitous in offering that type of device. And it also reminds me of Google. Google is very much also a company that uses its the people who buy its products as beta testers. And some people see that as a strength. Some people are like, well, you know what? Like, I understand that's part of the contract when I buy a Google product is that, things are going to change or whatever, but I like being on the cutting edge. I like being there early and seeing how, their mind works when they're creating products. And other people are like, why am I spending $300 on a device and I'm just a beta tester? And, Stadia, prime example, like, at this point, year after year after year, there have been enough failures and enough rugs being pulled out from under people that you stop trusting a company like Google when they announce a new product or whatever, because you know what? It's probably going to go away at some point. And everything, I guess, goes away at some point, but it doesn't go away at a point to which the person who bought it feels like they got what they expected or they got what they wanted out of that product.
Managing the expectations there is so important. And, Pebble was one example. We actually, I think, talked about it on this show to iFixit about Pebble having an aftermarket life and how, in fact, Brian X. Chen talked to iFixit about that very thing, where even though the Pebble no longer was supported by Pebble itself, it didn't close off that technology completely and make it so that you couldn't use it anymore. And if I'm going to buy a $200 to $300 camera, I expect to be able to have some sort of, firmware update or patch or something that at least lets me, even if it requires a little bit of development, a little bit of coding, some sort of nerdiness that maybe not everybody can take advantage of, to give me some sort of way to make use of the technology still. And so I think there's something disingenuous about experimenting with product design in public with the knowledge that this is like, this is a 2-year thing. If we don't get good usage in 2 years from now, then it needs to go away. And I think about the Echo frames. Amazon continues to update those and add like lens options and stuff, and they're very expensive. And I'm just curious how long it's going to be until they stop selling that product, because that is absolutely an iterative product that they've experimented with. So
I suppose with the Echo frames, even if the technology goes away, you could still wear them as fashionable glasses.
Oh my word, fashionable glasses. My tookus. Oh.
Well, that's really the big challenge about a lot of what you're talking about, is tying a piece of hardware explicitly to a service that exists in the cloud. There is a life, there is a specific lifespan for that product. It's not going to last forever. Getting a pair of Echo frames, it guaranteed that product is not going to work as successfully as it is 50 years down the line, probably not even 10 years down the line. If that's the most successful product in Amazon's catalog, it's still probably not going to work 10 years from now, because technology moves along. The way that they've built the ecosystem around it, in the cloud and the software to support it, all that stuff advances to a point to where that original hardware just isn't going to work. It's going to be outdated. And even outside of that, there's so many pieces of hardware that we're buying now that are so intrinsically tied to some sort of computing mechanism that isn't on device. And anytime we do that, we're at the mercy of the people who we're buying the hardware from. It's just, can we buy it and be confident that we're going to get enough? And what is enough? I don't know what the definition of enough is. It's probably different for everyone, but enough use out of it that we don't feel like we got completely ripped off in the process.
Agreed. Well, it just makes me very hesitant about, recommending or selling, or purchasing Amazon's more experimental products. Like I feel that it's pretty safe to buy Echo products, given how many different kinds they've worked on and how much attention is paid to that. Mm-hmm. But outside of that kind of smart speaker area, it's tough to want to be in that marketplace, because they could just pull the rug out from under you in a way, and that's not good.
Yeah.
All right. Let's not pull the rug out from under people, because we're going to give them a little bit of a segue here to say that this episode of Tech News Weekly is coming to an end today.
Yeah, don't worry. That rug's going nowhere. You can continue to stand on that rug. Heck, it's a really comfortable rug. So if you want to just lay down on that rug and take a nap, go for it. It's not going anywhere. In fact, this rug will be back next week when we do another episode of Tech News Weekly. We do it every Thursday. We roll out the rug every Thursday, twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe, audio, video, YouTube, all of those different ways that you can get access to this show. You'll find it there. Also want to mention really quick, we just launched a new feed, a new show of sorts. It's called Tech Break. And you may have heard us talk in years past about TWiT bits, and this is kind of the evolution of TWiT bits. TWiT bits are basically moments from our shows that we want to pull out and have them stand on their own. Tech Break is a little bit of that, but it's also a little bit of a lot of other things. We realized that, on a lot of our shows, like the prime example I can come up with is on All About Android. I do a show on Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Google announces Android 12 Beta 2, and I've got to wait until the following Tuesday to talk about it. And sometimes I want to talk about it like right now. And there's a million different examples of this. News is breaking all the time. We want a way to just quickly get something out and say, this is what I think about this, or I just got this new product and I'm unboxing it. And like, we're not going to produce maybe a full video about unboxing, but I've got my phone and I'm going to open up the synthesizer or whatever. So I'm just going to shoot it. Some of it's going to be rough and tumble, but it's really just kind of off the cuff, how we feel in the moment about certain things. And so that's going to end up in the Tech Break feed as well. So if you want to check this out, please do twit.tv/break. If you follow that URL, you can go and subscribe to this. And yeah, kind of follow our off the cuff musings as far as technology. And, you know, when there's a story that's important that really that we have something to talk about, we don't have to wait until next week to talk about it. We can do it right now, put it out on Tech Break, and you can check it out. So that's twit.tv/break.
Awesome. By the way, if you want to get all of our shows ad-free, well, you out there should check out Club TWiT. For $7 per month, you're going to get every TWiT show with no ads. Woohoo! And exclusive access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed with extra content, you know, before the show, after the show, in the midst of the show that may not make it to the main show. And what is easily the most fun part, in my opinion, of Club TWiT, that is access to the members-only Discord server, where you can join all of the fellow Club Twitters as well as us in chatting about shows and tech and posting GIFs and all sorts of good stuff. Just head to twit.tv/clubtwit. And again, for $7 a month, you can join Club TWiT. Join the party, join the fun. Join Club TWiT. By the way, if you want to send me a message or get in touch, you can follow me or tweet at me or message me or post me on many of the social media networks at Mikah Sargent. Later today, I'll be recording Smart Tech Today with Matthew Casanelli. So if IoT, Internet of Things is your thing, or smart devices in general is your thing, check out that show. And tomorrow with Rosemary Orchard, I'll be recording iOS Today. So be sure to check that out as well. Oh, and Hands-on Tech episode published yesterday showing the new iPad Pro that supports Thunderbolt using it in concert with a Thunderbolt dock to just absolutely expand the power of the iPad. It's really cool. So check out that episode of Hands-on Tech. Jason, what about you?
Nice. Find me on Twitter at Jason Howell, doing shows, you know, all about Android, twit.tv/AAA. I'll be doing a Hands-on Tech next week that's going to focus on the Pixel Buds A series that I showed off last week on this show. I had just gotten it. I'm going to do more of a deeper dive on them. My brief review is that I actually like them a lot. So I'm going to give you a full review on Hands-on Tech next week. Big thanks to John Ashley for controlling the board, pushing the buttons, making this show possible. Also, big thanks to Burke behind the scenes for sweating some of the stuff, connecting with people, testing calls, making sure the technology doesn't break. And that is it for this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. We will see you next time on this show. Take care, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.